6:30, so I think I may as well get started. I'll at least introduce SHBE, Saskatchewan Home Based Educators, and myself. My name is Rod Amberson. I am the president for 2020 of the Saskatchewan Home Based Educators, SHBE. SHBE is it is a voluntary association of parents. It's a membership organization. It's a nonprofit organization. Our goal is to support home-based educators, to be an advocacy group with the Ministry of Education and the provincial government, to create a positive social environment for home-based educators. To that end, we do Q&As, we do an annual convention for home-based educators, bring in vendors from all over North America, have world-class speakers. We just do our best to support parents and to encourage home-based education in Saskatchewan. We meet, close to, depends on the time and what's happening, but sometimes we meet monthly with the Ministry of Education. We just try and work through things. We meet with school divisions, and we, I guess, the area where we would overlap with local support groups is in our membership. But the next piece of the puzzle there is really your local group. In Regina, there's a group called Arch. There's homeschool groups in Estevan, Moose Jaw area, Saskatoon, Yorkton, all over the place. So I guess this is who SHBE is. Please also, it's really important that you find a local group as well. So this presentation today, I want to kind of do it in 4 parts. 1, introduction. 2, getting started. 3, paperwork and filing. And then 4, Q&A. So with that in mind, I'll proceed to just get this kicked off. So this is kind of the framework for home-based education in Saskatchewan. It's really important that we understand that there's 3 interests that need to be considered. Children have rights, parents have rights, and a state has interest. So the civil state, the province, has a compelling interest. That means that the province has been found to have just cause to restrict the personal freedom of parents and children in order to achieve certain goals that are consistent with a free and just society. That doesn't mean that they have a duty of care. It just means that an educated populace is better than a non-educated populace, and they have a compelling interest to ensure that happens. So as home-based educators, parents have not delegated the education of their children to the state or to a private institution. When you think about it, we have compulsory education laws in Saskatchewan, and we have for over 100 years. Those laws pretty much acknowledge that it is a parent's responsibility to provide their children with an education. Home-based education is an exception to that, to the compulsory school attendance law, being that you are providing that education directly. So the province meets its compelling interest by legalizing home-based education, officially legalizing it, rather than prior to 1978, it was just adequate education elsewhere. The school division is responsible to ensure the compelling interest of the state is met. The school division does not protect children from their parents. They do not approve. They do not need to agree with your written education plan. They only need to ensure or do their duty in checking that you have complied with the regulations. They're not liable for anything done or omitted, as long as it's in good faith. Home-based educators are responsible for the education of their children. Okay, that includes selecting programs and learning resources. That includes delivery. It is not laissez-faire. It's not a free-for-all. And I think if you're on this presentation, you're taking a good step, and you're showing care in finding out and getting information. So congratulations. I just want to touch on this really briefly, but it's important to recognize that this is the hierarchy that laws, regulation, policies, and procedures take. So first of all is the Education Act. Second of all is the Home-Based Education Program regulations. The regulations must be consistent with the Education Act, but they provide greater detail. And so down to the policy manual, this is where, if you really want to know how stuff works, this is the one document that you should be familiar with. This includes instructions to both school divisions and home-based educators, right? So if a school division wants to know how to monitor their administration of a home-based education program, this is where they look for direction. Then the school division has administrative procedures. They define how services are to be requested. They define how to request band sports, etc. These need to be consistent with the policy manual and so on. So that's why I kind of have those arrows pointing downward. And then we can come back to that because a lot of the filing and the paperwork is defined in the policy and procedures manual. But before we start worrying about paperwork and how to file, that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. And I want to make sure that we at least direct you, give you some direction, some positive direction, before you worry about the regulations, before you worry about buying resources or looking at curriculum. Just consider some of these things, some of these questions, right? You want to know why you want to homeschool. You want to know what you want to teach. You want to know how you want to approach it, what methodologies. And then you want to plan. And then finally, at the very last, you want to file. It doesn't make sense to set your goals before you've examined why you want to do this. I would suggest writing down at least one positive reason to homeschool. There's been a lot of talk on social media. I think every homeschooler in the province has had at least one person contact them asking them about home-based education because they are afraid of sending their kids back to school. I don't think that is a positive reason to homeschool. There's a lot of great reasons to homeschool. Family, togetherness, flexibility, specialized learning. Academics is one of the top reasons to homeschool. Passing on your family values, your faith. These are all positive reasons to homeschool. And think about that and write it down. In education, there's a lot of the talk is about what is the purpose and nature of education. For example, is the purpose of education to prepare for a career, to get ready to work for a lifetime? Is it learning for the sake of learning? Is it passing on values? These are all valid ideas about what is the purpose and nature of education. What topics do you want to cover? And here's something that homeschooling offers that probably offers better than anything else, is the intersection of subjects. I used to say that I could teach everything on a hunting trip. I can teach science with the trajectory. I can teach the math with the trajectory of the whatever. I can teach social studies through history. I can teach science on the biology of the animals, on the ecosystem that we're walking through. And you can teach language arts because it sounds funny, but you could bring, there's a lot of poetry that is nature-based, and you could be doing that too. It's just an example. It's kind of corny, but there you go. Historical novels may intersect with both language arts and social studies. We've taught a lot of history using historical novels. The value of that is that it generally fictionalizes the account, but it also allows your children to relate to that time and place. Speed, velocity, and rates of change in science and math. Those are some ideas. So that's really what. You can integrate faith, health, all kinds of things intersect with math, science, language arts, and social studies. The reason I'm mentioning those 4 things is those are the core subjects that you must have in your plan. Hey, I didn't know it was going to do that. There we go. How? So this is, how are you going, what do you imagine your homeschool looking like? Okay, try to think outside the box. And by that, I mean the classroom box. A lot of us went to school. We spent our however many hours sitting behind a desk while the teacher wrote questions and we answered them. We wrote reports, we did that. Homeschooling has a lot more flexibility than that. Maybe some of us did projects. Homeschooling lets you do a lot more of that. Homeschooling lets your kids walk around while they're learning. You don't have to just, what I'm trying to say is, think about it and try to imagine the possibilities when you're not needing to recreate the school classroom in your home. Assess your strengths and your weaknesses. What kind of a person are you when you sit down to teach your child? What about your child? Do they like to sit and do workbooks? Then that's a great option for them. Other children, you can sit them down and just the effort of sitting still destroys any attention span that they have. Maybe they need to be playing with Legos while you listen to a story. Hey, it works. Assess your own resources. What do you have that you can use? And then consider some different approaches. And you can look these up. Charlotte Mason is also called Living Books, classical education, unschooling. You can do a traditional curriculum. You can do unit studies. These are great approaches. And if they're right for you and your child, then they're the right approach. The next step is to plan. So when you're planning, you're shopping for and you're buying curriculum. You know what you're going to teach, you know why you're going to teach it, and you broadly understand how you're going to do it. Now you can look for curriculum, you can look for resources, you can join homeschool support groups, you can attend a homeschool convention. Those are all great things to plan for. And now you have what you need to file. Now you can submit your notice of intent. You can write your written education plan. Since you know what you're using for resources or curriculum, you can look in the table of contents in your math curriculum, for example, and you can pick out 3 topics. Those are 3 good, reword it somewhat. And those are 3 good broad annual goals. Maybe you've taken time now to kind of understand what the Saskatchewan curriculum is offering, and you can choose some of those learning outcomes. You can maybe make them a little more broad or a little more generic or a little more specific to your child. And there you go. You've got your broad annual goals. And then you can keep your records to be able to submit your annual progress report. I wanted to then go on to discuss the written education plan a little bit more. But I think it was important just to maybe back some people up into the how, the why, the what, and the how stage. Just give it some thought, and it'll make everything else fall together a lot more easily. That being said, it can be a little bit intimidating to fill out a written education plan. But just realize a plan is an intention or decision about what you want to do. Keep it flexible and enjoy the freedom. So the philosophical approach is the positive reason to homeschool. It can be based on style of education or a philosophical conviction. The 3 broad annual goals are only required for language arts, science, social studies, and mathematics. The means of assessment is for the whole entire written education plan, and it is either a portfolio of work or a standardized test. And then finally, the 4th thing in a written education plan is, what are you requesting from among the services that your local school division offers? So driver training and student assessments are required. All other services are at the discretion of the school division. They could include sports, music, art, funding, or reimbursements, but they don't have to provide any of that. So here's, again, some of the styles of education. I won't go into these. And this is more of a philosophical approach. So, what is the aim of education? What is the nature of the child? What is the role of the parent? So these are more philosophical. So these are some examples of filling out the written education plan philosophical approach. So you could say something like, and please use your own wording, we believe that all areas of learning are integrated and should not always be separated into discrete subjects. Learning should be a joyful exploration of the world, facilitated by great resources, unstructured play, games, and books with which children may freely engage. Or you might choose to say something based on philosophical convictions. We believe that parents are to disciple their children toward full, abundant human expression. Created with inherent dignity, children do not naturally tend towards virtuous character, but need correction and guidance to learn and to love what is true, good, and beautiful. The role of raising children, including their education, is given to parents. Excuse me. Broad annual goals. The main thing here, I would add, in addition to not inconsistent with the goals of education for Saskatchewan, is not inappropriate for the age and ability of your child. The goals of education for Saskatchewan date to 1985, I believe. You can Google those, but they're very, very, very broad. Goals like read, write, and compute, for example. So remember, broad is having a wide range of meanings, loosely defined, and goals are the objects of a person's ambition. So it's something you aim at, and bona fide, right? Like actually choose ones that you would like to achieve. But remember also that it's aiming. It's a target. And schools have targets. They don't always teach what they wish they could teach for whatever reason. And it's okay to say that a student has not demonstrated ability in a certain area, as long as you can justify for yourself why that happened. That is a summative record that you can provide at the end of the year. I would say the Saskatchewan curriculum is actually a great resource. You do not have to be consistent with the Saskatchewan curriculum. You have to be not inconsistent with the goals of education for Saskatchewan. But that being said, educators use jargon. They use technical language that they understand. They've had years of education, and that education and some, the jargon is useful. Read the learning outcomes because that will help you to speak educatorese. You can use those learning outcomes and say the wording in a similar manner for your broad annual goals. Means of assessment. Again, that's either a portfolio of work. The school division can administer standardized tests, or you can choose a third party. And if you meet those requirements for the standardized tests, you can administer them yourself. The portfolio of work does not necessarily mean samples of work. It can mean a periodic log and either a detailed summative record, sufficient samples of work, or a summative record and samples of work. And that is from the policy manual. And then finally, if you want to request services from your school division, this is where you would do it, is on your written education plan. SHBE has templates to help you with this. We will put those and make those available on our website. Our website is getting a major makeover. It will be shbe.info, shbe.info, shbe.ca redirects to that. We will make sure that those templates are on both. So the written education plan is due in the fall, at the beginning of your home-based education program. If you are renewing your home-based education plan, you should have your forms in August 15th, or if the school division has agreed to accept them later, then you can do them later. If you're newly, if you have never homeschooled before and you're just getting to this, you are supposed to give 30 days notice. So just when you fill out your notice of intent, get it in as soon as possible, and put your commencement date 30 days into the future. I would expect that school divisions will have to be more flexible at this time. The amount of interest in all kinds of alternative learning is just phenomenal, and it's a great thing. But it will require that registering authorities exhibit more flexibility at this time. A periodic log. So the regulations and the policy manual do not define a lot of things. So periodic is not really defined. We've said monthly, and that seems to be acceptable with all school divisions. It doesn't need to cover a certain broad annual goal. It does not need to represent all the learning that took place for that month. It does not need to detail certain outcomes that were observed. We have used in our family, we've used things like made progress in learning math concepts. We've listed books that we've read aloud together. There's a lot of different ways of keeping a periodic log, but essentially 1 sentence per month is adequate. The means of assessment. So when you submitted your written education plan, if you said portfolio of work, this is where it applies to you. This is what a portfolio of work is. The periodic log and the summative record or samples of work. So there should be one summative record and or one sample of work per broad annual goal. It does need to be bona fide, it does need to be real, and it needs to be, it's kind of a negotiation between you and the school division on what sufficient means. But I would suggest, and I've looked at almost every school division in the province on what they supply to parents in terms of a report card on how they've performed for the year in teaching their children, the parents' children. And they use words like has demonstrated mastery of the subject. So you don't need to include both a summative record and a sample of work, but you may. And you may only include a summative record or only a sample of work. But if you provide samples of work, please be kind and label them as to which broad annual goal you're submitting those to as a method of assessment. Okay, so here's some of the ideas that various school divisions use when on their report cards. Mastery demonstrates a deep knowledge and understanding of, and then restate the broad annual goal. This is reasonable, and it seems to be well received by the school divisions so far.